March 30th, 1942. 800 hours. The Army Air Corps bomber pilot saw them first. 5 lifeboats drifting 80 miles south of Norfolk, Virginia. The Atlantic was calm that morning. Unusually calm for late March. The kind of calm that makes you nervous when you know what the ocean can do. He circled lower. The lifeboats were empty. Completely empty. No bodies, no survivors, no wreckage nearby. Just 5 wooden boats painted navy gray, their serial numbers still visible on weathered hulls. USS Phantom, a K-101. The pilot checked his charts. There was no ship by that name in any official registry. He radioed back to base, described what he saw, the coordinates, the condition of the boats, and one other detail that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Blood, dried and dark on the wooden seats, sprayed across the gunnels, pooled in the bilges. Evidence of 141 American sailors who had simply vanished from the face of the earth. The pilot was 24 years old. He would fly combat missions over Europe for the next 3 years. He would survive the war, come home, raise a family, live to be 87. But he would never forget those empty boats, the way they looked against the blue water, the silence, the absolute silence of death without witnesses. 37 days earlier, Commander James Morrison stood on a different deck under a different sky. Portsmouth Navy Yard, Kittery, Maine. March 23rd, 1300 hours. The weather was cold. North wind cutting through his bridge coat, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. Morrison was 38 years old, born in a small town in Kentucky where the biggest excitement was Saturday night dances at the Grange Hall. His father had been a tobacco farmer. His mother took in laundry. There was no money for college, no money for anything except food and survival. So Morrison enlisted in the Navy in 1926. 17 years old, skinny kid with big dreams and bigger questions. He worked his way up from seaman to petty officer. Studied at night by lamplight. Mathematics, navigation, gunnery, everything he could learn. In 1928, against odds that would have stopped most men, he won an appointment to the Naval Academy. Not through connections, not through money, through sheer stubborn determination and test scores that made the selection board sit up and take notice. He graduated class of 1928, top third of his class, specialist in gunnery, the science of making shells hit targets at impossible distances. For the next 14 years, Morrison served on destroyers and cruisers, Pacific Fleet, Atlantic Fleet, Caribbean patrols. He learned his trade, learned how ships moved through water, how men responded under pressure, how battles were won and lost in the seconds between decision and action. By 1942, Morrison was a career officer with a wife and 2 daughters back in Charleston, South Carolina. Margaret, 28 years old, Sarah, 8, Emma, 5. The 3 people who made everything else make sense. And on this cold March morning, Morrison was taking command of a ship that looked like it had no business going to war. USS Phantom, hull number AK-101, a 30-year-old cargo steamer that had been built in 1912 when the Titanic was still news. Single-screw steam engine, top speed 9 knots if you pushed her hard and prayed the boilers held. Rust streaks on the hull, faded paint, sagging deck lines. The kind of ship you see rotting in backwater ports waiting for the scrapyard. Except she was not what she appeared to be. Hidden behind false cargo hatches and fake deck houses, the Phantom carried enough firepower to sink a German submarine. 4 4-inch naval guns, 8 50 caliber machine guns, 6 depth charge projectors, hydraulic panels that could drop away in 3 seconds, revealing weapons that no merchant ship should possess. On paper, this vessel was the SS Wilhelmina, Portuguese registry, neutral nation, carrying pulpwood to England. Just another slow, defenseless cargo hauler trying to survive the Atlantic crossing. In reality, she was America's most secret weapon in a war that was going very, very badly. A Q ship, the old British trick from the last war, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a trap designed to lure German U-boats to the surface and destroy them at point-blank range before they knew what hit them. Morrison knew the history. British Q-ships in World War I had mixed success at best. Some had worked brilliantly. Entire U-boat crews slaughtered in ambushes that violated every rule of honorable warfare. Other Q-ships had been torpedoed before they could spring their trap. sent to the bottom with all hands. He also knew that 4 previous American Q-ship patrols had produced exactly 0 U-boat kills. 0. The program was experimental, desperate, born from political pressure rather than tactical wisdom. But Morrison believed in the mission, not because he thought it would work. He was too experienced for that kind of optimism. He believed because somebody had to try, because German submarines were destroying American shipping faster than the shipyards could replace it, because merchant sailors were dying every single day while America learned how to fight this war, and because when your country asks you to answer, even when the odds are terrible, even when you know it might be suicide. Morrison had said goodbye to his family 3 days earlier. Margaret had held him longer than usual. She was smart enough to read between the lines of what he could and could not tell her. She knew this mission was different, dangerous, maybe a one-way trip. Sarah and Emma were too young to understand why Daddy was leaving again. Too young to know that this might be the last time they saw him. Morrison had written a letter before he left Charleston, sealed it, given it to Margaret with instructions to open it only if he did not come home. The letter was brief. Morrison was not good with words on paper. He was better with numbers, trajectories, firing solutions, things that had clear answers. But he tried. This mission is important, he wrote, but I cannot tell you why. If something happens, know that I believed we were making a difference. Kiss the girls for me. I love you more than I can say. Margaret Morrison would keep that letter in her Bible for the next 72 years. Until she died at age 100 in 2014, still wearing the wedding ring Jim had given her in 1924. Now Morrison stood on the bridge of the Phantom and watched Portsmouth disappear behind the harbor breakwater. The Phantom looked exactly like what she pretended to be, an old cargo steamer, rust streaks carefully painted on fresh steel, weathered wood stained to look decades older than it was. Even the crew wore civilian clothes, merchant marine gear, no uniforms, 141 men, officers, petty officers, gunners, engine room crew deckhands, most in their 20s. Some teenagers, a few in their 30s. They came from every part of America, farm towns in Iowa, industrial cities in Pennsylvania, coastal communities in Massachusetts, small towns in Texas where people still remembered the Alamo. Some had been in the Navy for years. Others had enlisted after Pearl Harbor. 3 months of training, maybe 6. Barely enough time to learn which end of a rifle to point at the enemy. But they all knew they were sailing into danger. They all knew the mission was classified. And they all knew that if something went wrong, their families might never learn what happened to them. 2 other men stood on the Phantom's bridge that morning. Men who would shape everything that followed. Ensign David Chen, 22 years old. Fresh from MIT, where he had been studying mathematics and physics until December 7th, 1941, changed everything. Chen was brilliant, the kind of brilliant that makes professors nervous. He could calculate firing solutions in his head faster than most men could work them out on paper. He was also Chinese-American at a time when that meant something, when it meant extra scrutiny, extra pressure to prove loyalty, extra need to demonstrate that he was just as American as anyone else. Chen had dropped out of MIT 3 days after Pearl Harbor. Walked into the Navy recruiting office in Boston, volunteered, not drafted, volunteered because he wanted to prove something to his parents who ran a laundry in San Francisco, to the neighborhood kids who had called him names, to himself. The Navy had made him a gunnery officer. Perfect fit for his mathematical mind. Give Chen a target, speed, distance, and bearing, and he would tell you exactly where to aim. Every single time. But Chen had never fired a shot in anger, never seen combat, never watched men die. All his knowledge was theoretical, numbers on paper, problems with clean solutions. He was about to learn that war does not respect theory. The other man was Chief Petty Officer Robert Mackenzie. Everyone called him Bull, 45 years old, broad shoulders, thick hands scarred from decades of engine room work, a face that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Mackenzie was a World War I veteran. He had served on destroyers in the North Atlantic in 1917 and 1918. He had seen British Q ships in action. Watched them work. Watched them fail. Watched good men die for tactics that sounded clever in planning rooms, but fell apart when they met reality. Mackenzie was the only man in the Phantom's crew who openly questioned the mission. Not to Morrison's face. That would have been an insubordination. But in the engine room, among his own men, Mackenzie made his opinion clear. This is suicide, he told them. Q ships are obsolete. The Germans know about them. They fought British Q ships in the last war. They are not going to fall for this trick. But Mackenzie was also a career Navy man. He followed orders. He did his duty. And if this was how the Navy wanted to spend his life, well, that was the Navy's decision to make. Morrison knew what Mackenzie thought, knew the chief was probably right. But Morrison also knew that sometimes you have to try even when success is not guaranteed. Sometimes trying is the only option you have. The Phantom cleared Portsmouth Harbor at 1400 hours, turned southeast, began her slow passage toward waters where German submarines hunted American ships like wolves among sheep. And 300 miles to the east, a man Morrison had never met was preparing for his own mission, a mission that would intersect with the Phantom in ways neither man could predict. Kapitänleutnant Karl Brenner, 29 years old, commander of U-Boat 117, 9 confirmed kills in 3 weeks of hunting off the American coast. Knight's Cross recipient, veteran submarine officer with ice water in his veins and a mathematical approach to warfare that would have impressed David Chen if they had ever met under different circumstances. Brenner had been born in Hamburg in 1913. Navy family. His father had died at Jutland in World War I when Karl was 3 years old. The boy grew up with stories of naval glory and national sacrifice. He joined the Kriegsmarine in 1932, trained as a naval aviator, loved flying, loved the freedom of the sky. Then in 1939, a training accident, plane crash, shattered left knee. Medical board declared him unfit for aviation duty. Career over at age 26. Except Brenner refused to accept that verdict. If he could not fly, he would sail. Or rather, he would sail beneath the waves where damaged knees did not matter. U-Boat School, November 1939. Top of his class, first command in May 1941. U-117. Type 9 long-range submarine. Big enough to cross the Atlantic. Fast enough to catch merchant ships. Armed enough to sink anything that could not fight back. Brenner approached submarine warfare like a mathematics problem. Tonnage sunk versus torpedoes expended. Fuel consumed versus distance traveled. Risk versus reward. Fragments. Everything calculated. Everything measured. Nothing left to chance or emotion. By March 1942, Brenner had sunk 19 ships, 90,000 tons of Allied shipping sent to the bottom. He was efficient, ruthless when necessary, but also in his own way honorable. He helped survivors when he could do so safely, provided them with navigation directions, radioed their positions to neutral ships, not out of sentiment, out of calculation. Brenner believed that honorable conduct would serve Germany better in the long run than unnecessary cruelty. That captured sailors told stories, that those stories shaped how the world saw German submariners. He was fighting a war, not conducting a genocide. On March 26, 1942, U-117 was cruising 300 miles east of Norfolk, Virginia. Hunting, patient, waiting for targets. Brenner had 4 torpedoes remaining. Electric G-7E models. Silent running. Expensive. Each torpedo cost more than most German workers earned in 5 years. Standing orders were clear, conserve torpedoes when possible. Uses the deck gun on soft targets. At 1700 hours, the lookout spotted smoke on the horizon. Bearing 270, range approximately 12,000 meters. Brenner climbed to the conning tower, raised his binoculars, studied the target through lenses ground in Zeiss workshops to optical perfection. Old cargo steamer, single funnel, slow speed, maybe 8 or 9 knots, no escort, no visible armament, sailing alone through waters where German submarines operated with near impunity, an easy kill. Brenner made his decision, shadow the target until conditions were optimal, then surface and attack with the deck gun, save the torpedoes for convoy work tomorrow. Standard procedure, safe, smart, except this target was not standard, and the next 3 hours would teach both Brenner and Morrison lessons that would echo through the rest of their lives. On the Phantom, Morrison felt it before he saw anything concrete. That sixth sense combat officers develop. The prickling on the back of your neck. The tightness in your gut. The knowledge that something is wrong even when nothing looks wrong. Possible periscope, the lookout called. Bearing 090, Morrison did not move, did not react. If there was a U-boat watching, any change in behavior would give away the game. The Phantom had to look like what she pretended to be, a merchant ship going about her business, oblivious to danger. Battle stations, Morrison said quietly. No visible activity. Make it look natural. Below decks, 141 men moved to positions they had rehearsed for 3 weeks. Gun crews crouched behind false deckhouses. Ammunition handlers stood ready at concealed hoists. Machine gunners settled in behind fake cargo equipment. Everyone waiting, everyone silent, everyone terrified. David Chen was at his station behind the forward gun mount, hands on the hydraulic panel release. He had calculated the optimal ambush range, 600 to 800 yards. Close enough that the 4-inch guns could not miss. Far enough that a submarine might not see the trap before it was too late. But Chen's calculations had not accounted for one variable: human nature. Would the German commander be cautious, or would he be overconfident after weeks of easy kills? In the engine room, Bull Mackenzie checked his gauges. Steam pressure, fuel levels, flooding systems. The Phantom was rigged to stay afloat even after a torpedo hit. Pulpwood cargo packed in every hold. Buoyant, unsinkable in theory. Mackenzie knew the difference between theory and practice. 1 torpedo hit, they might survive. 2 hits, they were dead men sailing. He wiped his hands on a rag, looked at the young sailors around him. Kids, most of them. 18, 19, 20. Too young to die in the engine room of a rust bucket, pretending to be something it was not. But this was war, and war does not care about what is fair or right or reasonable. For 2 hours and 37 minutes, U-117 followed the Phantom, submerged, patient, waiting. On the Phantom, men fought to stay still, to look like merchant sailors going about routine business. Morrison paced the bridge, forcing himself to walk casually even though every nerve screamed for action. The sun was setting, storm clouds building on the northeast horizon, weather turning, seas picking up from calm to moderate, swells running 8 to 10 feet. Then at 1937 hours, everything changed. U-117 surfaced, 800 yards off the Phantom's port quarter. Morrison's heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his temples. This was it, the moment they had trained for, the moment that would prove whether American ingenuity could beat German ruthlessness. "Hold," he whispered into the speaking tube. "Hold your fire. Hold." On U-117, Brenner ordered tube 1 loaded, electric torpedo, 1 fish to cripple the target, then surface gun to finish the job. Clean, efficient, economical. At 1937 hours and 30 seconds, Brenner gave the order that would change everything. Fire. The torpedo left its tube at 40 knots, 15 seconds to impact. Morrison saw the wake cutting through the darkening water, straight, true, unstoppable. "Here it comes," he shouted. "Brace for impact." The explosion tore a 20-foot hole in the Phantom's support side directly under the bridge. Fire erupted from the cargo hold. The ship lurched 8 degrees to port. Men were thrown against bulkheads. Equipment crashed loose. Steam lines ruptured. 12 men died instantly. Just gone. Vaporized by the blast or crushed by collapsing steel. Morrison felt something hot and wet on his left arm. Shrapnel. He looked down. Blood soaking through his uniform jacket. Not fatal. Not yet. But painful. Very painful. The bridge was on fire. 2 helmsmen dead at their posts, radio sparking and dying, smoke everywhere. "Damage control," Morrison shouted. "Launch starboard lifeboat. Make it look real." This was the plan. Take the first hit. Launch boats. Play dead. Make the U-boat think they had won. Make them come closer. 20 men scrambled into the lifeboat. Some genuinely panicked, others acting, all of them playing their parts in this deadly theater. Morrison watched U-117 circle around the Phantom's stern. Brenner was being careful, smart, staying at range, 650 yards, then 620, 600. Morrison's hand was on the signal button. 1 press, 3 seconds. The panels would drop. The guns would swing into position. But if he gave the order too soon, if Brenner was still too far away, the 4-inch guns would miss. And a submarine that knows you are a Q ship will not give you a second chance. Morrison's finger hovered over the button. blood from his wounded arm dripping onto the deck. 600 yards, 580, 560. Brenner was turning broadside now. Perfect gun platform. Getting ready to finish the kill. Now Morrison screamed, "Drop panels, fire, fire, fire." The hydraulic system engaged. 3 seconds. The panels fell away with a crash of metal on metal. False deck houses collapsed. Fake cargo hatches opened. 4 4-inch naval guns swung into firing position. 8 machine guns unmasked. The Phantom dropped her disguise and showed her teeth. David Chen fired first. Range 620 yards. Optimal. Perfect. Except the ship was listing 8 degrees from the torpedo damage. Chen's calculations had not accounted for that. The shell hit the water 50 yards short of U-117. A massive splash, close. But close does not count in naval gunnery. On the U-boat's conning tower, Brenner's eyes went wide with shock and sudden understanding. "Scheisse," he shouted. "Cue ship. Dive, dive, dive." For just 3 seconds, Carl Brenner stared death in the face. 3 seconds when he realized he had violated standing orders. When he understood that his decision to close range and use the deck gun might cost him his boat and his crew and his life. 3 seconds that would teach him more about warfare than 4 years of training. Chen fired again. Miss, off in deflection. U-117 was turning too fast. Diesel engines pouring black smoke as the submarine accelerated. Third shot. Miss, high. The submarine was already starting its dive. Bow dipping beneath the waves, but the machine guns found their target. 50 caliber rounds raking the conning tower. Bullets pinging off steel. Some penetrating, some ricocheting. Inside, midshipman Fritz Holtzman took a round through the chest. 23 years old. From Hamburg. His father had died at Jutland, just like Brenner's father. Now Fritz was dying the same way. At sea. Far from home. Fighting a war that would consume his entire generation. Brenner caught him as he fell, felt the boy's blood warm on his hands. Watched the light go out of eyes that had seen only 23 years of life. "Man down," Brenner shouted. "Crash dive. Emergency procedures." U-117 went under at a 90-degree angle, flooding ballast tanks faster than designed, metal groaning under stress. The submarine shuddering as it plunged towards safety. Chen's fourth shot passed through empty air where the conning tower had been 3 seconds earlier. The ocean was empty, no U-boat, no debris, no oil slick, just bubbles rising to the surface, and then nothing. Morrison lowered his binoculars. "Cease fire." "Did we get him?" Chen asked, his voice shaking. Adrenaline and fear and hope all mixed together. Bull Mackenzie climbed up from below decks. His face was grim, years of experience written in every line. "Engine room is flooding," he said. "We are dead in the water, Commander." No power, and that German is still out there. Morrison looked at the darkening sky, storm clouds building, seas getting rougher. The Phantom was crippled, burning, listing. No power, no propulsion, no way to maneuver, and somewhere below them, a German submarine was still alive. Damaged, maybe. Scared, certainly. But alive. Morrison knew what came next. He had seen enough combat to understand how this worked. They had hurt Brenner, scared him, maybe even damaged his boat. But they had not killed him, and wounded animals are the most dangerous kind. Beneath the waves in the iron belly of U-117, Carl Brenner knelt beside a dying boy. The emergency lights cast everything in red. Battle lighting, the color of blood, the color of warning, the color that tells you something has gone terribly wrong. Fritz Holtzman was 23 years old. He had joined the Kriegsmarine because his father had died at Jutland, and he wanted to honor that sacrifice. Wanted to prove that the Holtzman name meant something. That German naval tradition was worth carrying forward into this new war. Now Fritz lay on the control room deck with a 50 caliber round through his right lung. Blood bubbled on his lips with each shallow breath. His eyes were wide, not with fear, with confusion. The kind of confusion that comes when your body betrays you and your mind cannot quite process what is happening. Brenner held the boy's hand. There was nothing else to do. No doctor aboard, no medical equipment beyond basic first aid kits, no surgery possible in a submarine running silent at 200 meters depth. Herr Cologne Fritz whispered. His voice was wet, thick with blood. Did we get them? Brenner looked at the young face. Pale, growing paler. Life draining away with each labored breath. He lied. Yes, Brenner said, we got them. You can rest now. Fritz tried to smile. Failed. His hand went slack in Brenner's grip. At 20:15 hours, 15 minutes after the Phantom had opened fire, Midshipman Fritz Holtzman died on the deck of U-117. Brenner closed the boy's eyes, stood, looked at his first officer. Damage report, he said. His voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a commander who cannot afford emotion. 7 dents in the pressure hull from machine gun fire, the first officer replied. Starboard dive plane damaged but functional, no leaks, no structural failure. We were lucky, Herr Kalun. Lucky, Brenner thought about that word. Lucky meant Fritz Holtzman was dead, but the rest of them were alive. Lucky meant they had escaped a trap that should have killed them all. Lucky meant Brenner had violated standing orders and survived the consequences. For now. Standing orders from Admiral Donitz were explicit. When in doubt about a merchant vessel attack from maximum range with torpedoes, do not surface, do not close to gun range, do not give the enemy a chance to surprise you. German intelligence had warned all U-boat commanders about Q-ships. The British had used them in the last war. The Americans might try the same tactic. Be cautious. Be suspicious. Trust nothing. Brenner had ignored those warnings. Why? Because 3 weeks of easy kills had made him overconfident. Because the American coastal defense was a joke. Because merchant ships were slow and defenseless, and he could save expensive torpedoes by using the deck gun. Because he had gotten lazy, and Fritz Holtzman had paid the price. Brenner looked at the boy's body. Someone had covered it with a blanket. Standard procedure. You could not leave corpses lying around a submarine. Too disturbing for crew morale. But the blanket did not hide the shape underneath. Did not erase the fact that a young man was dead because his commander had made a stupid decision. The first officer spoke quietly. Sir, recommend we withdraw. That ship is crippled. The Atlantic will finish her. We should head for home. Brenner did not answer immediately. He was thinking, calculating, running the numbers the way he always did. 3 torpedoes remaining. Fuel sufficient for 4 more days of patrol. Food adequate. Mechanical status good, despite minor damage. Tactically, the smart move was to withdraw. The Q-ship was done. Dead in the water. No threat. Why waste another torpedo? But Brenner was not thinking tactically anymore. He was thinking emotionally. And emotion is dangerous in submarine warfare. They tried to kill us with a coward's trick, Brenner said, disguising a warship as a merchant vessel. There is no honor in that. Sir, standing orders clearly state, I do not care about standing orders. The control room went silent. Submariners learn to read tone. They learn when a commander is open to debate and when a decision has been made. This was the second kind. Load tube 3, Brenner said. We are going back. On the Phantom, Morrison was facing impossible arithmetic. The damage report came in sections, each section worse than the last. Forward torpedo hit 20-foot hole in port side hull. 12 men dead in initial blast. 2 bulkheads compromised. Flooding contained but not stopped. Engine room flooded to 3 feet depth. Bull Mackenzie and his crew had saved the boilers, but the single screw propeller was dead. No power, no propulsion. The Phantom could not move under her own steam. Communications radio damaged. Distress signal going out but weak. Intermittent. Maybe reaching friendly ships. Maybe not. Fires, 3 cargo holds burning. Mostly under control but still dangerous. Smoke everywhere. Heat everywhere. Men fighting with extinguishers and bucket brigades like this was the 19th century. List 8 degrees to port and getting worse. The pulpwood cargo was keeping them afloat, but the ship was slowly rolling over. Morrison called his officers to the bridge. Chen, Mackenzie, Lieutenant Williams, the chief gunner. 3 men who would help him decide how 129 survivors would spend their last hours. Gentlemen, Morrison said. His left arm was bandaged, blood seeping through the gauze, pain radiating up to his shoulder. We have 2 options. Abandon ship now before she goes down, or stay aboard and wait for that U-boat to finish us. Lieutenant Williams spoke first. He was 35 years old, career gunner, optimistic by nature. Commander with respect, we heard him. Maybe he will break off. Maybe he has had enough. Bull Mackenzie laughed. No humor in it, just bitter recognition of reality. Break off, are you joking? We just tried to kill him with a dirty trick. He is going to come back. And when he does, he will not surface. He will put a torpedo straight into our engine room and watch us sink. David Chen looked at Morrison. The young ensign's face was pale, shocked. He had just fired his first shots in combat. Missed, failed, 4 shots and 0 hits. All his mathematical genius had not been enough when the ship was listing and the target was moving, and reality refused to cooperate with theory. What about the destroyers, Chen asked. The support ships. Morrison checked his chart. The nearest destroyer was 90 miles away. At flank speed, maybe 4 hours to arrival. 4 hours. Morrison looked at the darkening sky. Storm front moving in, seas building, wind picking up. If they abandon ship now, the lifeboats might survive the storm. Might be found by search aircraft in the morning. Might make it. If they stayed aboard the crippled Phantom, they would at least have the satisfaction of fighting back. One more chance to spring the trap. One more opportunity to kill the U-boat that had killed their shipmates. Might, maybe, perhaps. The vocabulary of men who do not control their own fate. Morrison made his decision. The same decision he had been making his entire career. The decision that defines military service. We stay, he said. We fight. And if we are going down, we take that bastard with us. For the next hour and a half, the Phantom's crew performed miracles. Mackenzie worked magics in the engine room. Could not give Morrison power for propulsion. The drive shaft was bent. The reduction gears were damaged. The propeller might as well have been welded in place. But Mackenzie could keep the ship afloat, could keep the boilers running for electrical power, could maintain lighting and pumps and hydraulics, could give the gun crews one more chance to do their job. Chen's gunners stayed at their battle stations. Panels back up, weapons hidden again, playing dead again, waiting for the U-boat to surface and inspect its handiwork. If Brenner surfaced, if he came close, if he gave them one more shot. 3 ifs, 3 pieces of hope balanced against tons of cold reality. The 20 men in the lifeboat waited 100 yards off the starboard side. They had launched as part of the deception. Now they were genuinely cut off. No way back to the ship, not enough power to winch the boat back up. Just 20 sailors in a wooden boat watching their ship burn and wondering if they were the lucky ones or the doomed ones. Seaman Thomas Wright sat in that lifeboat and tried not to think about what came next. He was 19 years old. From Des Moines, Iowa. His father owned a hardware store. His mother taught Sunday school. Normal people living normal lives in a normal town where the most exciting thing was high school football on Friday nights. Tommy had joined the Navy in January 1942, 6 weeks after Pearl Harbor. Wanted to serve. Wanted to do his part. Wanted to prove that Iowa farm boys could fight just as hard as anyone else. Now he sat in a lifeboat 300 miles from land, watching the only ship he had ever served on, dying in the twilight. Wondering if he would see tomorrow. Wondering if his parents would ever know what happened to him. Thomas Wright did not know it yet, but he would be the last man from the Phantom's crew to die. 4 days from now. Alone, frozen, clutching a logbook with entries that would break hearts when they were finally read. But that was 4 days away. Right now, Wright was alive. Scared but alive. Hopeful but terrified. And 300 feet below the surface, Carl Brenner was making his own calculations. U-117 crept through the black water like a predator circling wounded prey. Hydrophones listening. Sonar pinging. Every sensor focused on the crippled American ship above. Brenner stood in the control room, studying the plot. The Q ship was dead in the water. Listing, burning, no propulsion, no maneuverability, a perfect target. His first officer tried one more time. Herr Kalun, we should withdraw. This ship is finished. Let the ocean take her. We have 3 torpedoes left. There will be convoys tomorrow. Better targets, safer kills. Brenner did not answer. He was staring at Fritz Holtzman's body, still covered with the blanket. Still lying on the deck, because there was no time for burial at sea when you were running silent below an enemy who might have depth charges. The Americans had tried to kill him, not in honest combat, not in a fair fight between warships. They had used deception, disguise, a dirty trick straight out of the last war, and they had almost succeeded. Brenner touched his left knee, the one shattered in the plane crash, the one that had ended his flying career and sent him to the submarines. The knee reminded him every day that life was about adapting, overcoming, refusing to accept defeat. The Americans thought they could beat him with cleverness, with traps and tricks and ambushes. He would show them that German naval efficiency trumped American cleverness every single time. Bering, Brenner asked. 350 Herr Cologne, range 1,200 meters and steady. Perfect. Close enough for a guaranteed hit. Far enough to be safe from any weapons the Q ship might still have operational. Solution set jaw, Herr Cologne. Torpedo ready. Brenner took one last look at Fritz Holtzmann's covered body. For Holtzmann, he said quietly, then louder, fire tube 3. The torpedo left U-117's tube at 21:29 hours and 30 seconds. G-70 electric model. Silent running, no bubble wake, no warning, just death moving through black water at 40 knots. Range 1,200 meters. 70-second run time. On the Phantom, Morrison had no warning, no hydrophone alert, no sonar contact, nothing. The first indication something was wrong was the massive explosion amidships. The torpedo hit dead center in the engine room, the exact worst place it could possibly hit. Every submarine commander's dream shot, perfect placement, perfect timing, perfect execution. The boilers exploded, 500 pounds of steam pressure released in a fraction of a second. Superheated vapor erupting through ventilation shafts and access tunnels and any opening it could find. 17 men died instantly. Not from the torpedo, from the steam, scalded, burned, cooked alive in temperatures hot enough to boil water in their lungs. Chief Bull Mackenzie was one of them. 1 second he was tightening a valve, trying to control the flooding, trying to keep his ship alive. The next second there was white light and heat and nothing. Bull Mackenzie, 45 years old, World War I veteran, father of 3, simply ceased to exist. His body was vaporized so completely that searchers would never find a single trace. Not a tooth, not a button, not a fragment of bone. Gone. The explosion broke the Phantom's spine. 30-year-old steel, already weakened by the first torpedo, could not handle the stress. The ship's keel fractured amidships. Bow and stern began to separate. The vessel that had been one ship was becoming two halves held together only by deck plating and hope. Morrison was blown off the bridge. He did not remember falling, did not remember hitting the foredeck 20 feet below. Just a moment of confusion and then pain everywhere. 3 ribs cracked, concussion, left arm useless from the earlier shrapnel wound, right shoulder dislocated, blood in his mouth, ringing in his ears, vision blurred. David Chen found him lying on the deck among scattered equipment and debris. Commander Chen shouted. His voice seemed to come from very far away. "Commander, can you hear me?" Morrison's eyes fluttered open. The world was spinning. Nothing made sense. He tried to speak, could only whisper. "Abandon ship," Morrison said. "Get them off." Chen looked at the ship breaking apart around them. The bow tilting down, the stern rising up, water flooding in from a dozen breaches, fires everywhere, smoke everywhere, men screaming. "I have got you," Sir Chen said. He grabbed Morrison under the shoulders, started dragging him toward the nearest lifeboat. 100 men were still alive, out of 141 who had sailed from Portsmouth 3 days earlier. 12 dead from the first torpedo, 29 dead from the second explosion and steam. 100 men surviving, for now. 5 lifeboats remained operational. One was already in the water with 20 men. 4 others hung from davits on the dying ship's side. And now, finally, after 3 weeks of training and 3 days of waiting and 3 hours of combat, Bull Mackenzie's emergency drills would prove their worth. Because in chaos, training takes over. When your mind cannot process what is happening, your body remembers what it practiced. Muscle memory saves lives when conscious thought fails. Lifeboat number 1, Chief Gunner Williams commanding. 28 men, lowered successfully, cleared the ship, pulled away to safe distance. Lifeboat number 2. Launching sequence started. The davit falls groaned under the weight. Too much weight, too many men trying to crowd in. The port side fall snapped. The boat tumbled sideways. 15 men thrown into the Atlantic. 42-degree water. 30-minute survival time. Lifeboat number 3 launched successfully. 22 men aboard. Williams shouting orders. men rowing hard to get clear before the ship went down and took them with it. Lifeboat number 4 launched successfully. 19 men, Thomas Wright among them, pulling away from the Phantom, watching the ship that had been their home for 3 days dying in fire and chaos. Lifeboat number 5 jammed, the davit mechanism frozen. Rust or damage or just bad luck. 12 men aboard, trying desperately to free it, using hammers, pry bars, desperate strength born of desperation. Chen got Morrison into Lifeboat 1. Williams and 2 sailors pulled the commander aboard. Morrison was semi-conscious, mumbling, bleeding. "Shove off," Williams ordered. "Get clear." But Chen was looking back at the ship, at Lifeboat 5, still jammed, 12 men still trapped on the dying Phantom. Ensign Williams shouted, "Get in the boat, that is an order." Chen was 22 years old, MIT graduate, brilliant mathematician, naval officer who had never disobeyed an order in his life. He looked at Williams, looked at Morrison, looked at the 12 men on the Phantom trying to free Lifeboat 5. He made a choice. "Get the commander clear!" Chen shouted, "I am going back." And before anyone could stop him, David Chen was climbing back aboard the USS Phantom. David Chen reached Lifeboat 5 30 seconds before everything ended. The 12 men were still working the jammed davit, hammering, pulling, desperate. The Phantom was dying beneath them. Bow settling deeper, stern rising higher. The ship was breaking in half and they were running out of time. Chen grabbed the davit mechanism, saw the problem immediately. The pulley was seized. Rusted solid from the fire. No amount of hammering would free it. "We can cut it loose," one of the men shouted. "Drop the boat straight down." How, Chen asked. With what nobody had an answer. No axes, no cutting tools, just bare hands and failing hope. From Lifeboat 1, 100 yards away, Morrison regained enough consciousness to see what was happening. "Chen," he screamed, his voice breaking. "Raw, that is an order. Abandon ship, now." Chen heard him, turned. For just 1 second, their eyes met across the dark water. Morrison would remember that moment for the rest of his life. The way Chen looked at him, not defiant, not disobedient, just sad. The way you look at someone when you know you are saying goodbye. Chen turned back to the davit. One more time, he shouted to the 12 men. "Pull!" They pulled. The davit gave slightly. The boat shifted. Hope flickered. And then the forward hold exploded. Nobody knows what caused it. Maybe the depth charges stored there triggered by pressure as the ship sank. Maybe ammunition for the 4-inch guns cooked off by fire. Maybe a secondary steam explosion from ruptured pipes. Maybe just structural failure causing a massive implosion as compromised bulkheads collapsed inward. But the cause did not matter. Only the result mattered. At 21 hours, 50 minutes, and 12 seconds, the USS Phantom exploded. Not sank, not burned, exploded. A fireball 200 feet high erupted from the dying ship. Orange and red and white, hot enough to be seen from 20 miles away. Loud enough to be heard on shore if the wind had been right. The blast wave hit Lifeboat 1 like a physical blow. Capsized it, threw Morrison and 27 other men into the freezing Atlantic. 42-degree water that kills in minutes. Lifeboats 3 and 4 closer to the ship were swamped by the wave. Partially flooded, men thrown overboard. Equipment washed away. The boats survived, but barely. Lifeboat 2, the one that had already dumped its 15 men in the water, simply disintegrated, blown to pieces by debris raining down from the explosion. And Lifeboat 5, the one with Chen and 12 men still aboard the Phantom, simply ceased to exist. Vaporized in the blast. 13 human beings reduced to atoms scattered across miles of ocean. No bodies to recover, no remains to bury, just names on a roster and families waiting at home for men who would never return. David Chen, 22 years old, MIT genius, Chinese-American who volunteered to prove his loyalty. Gone. When the fireball faded, there was nothing left of the USS Phantom. Not a hull, not a not a single recognizable piece of superstructure. Just wreckage, burning oil on the water, floating debris, and men, dozens of men, in the ocean. Morrison surfaced gasping. The cold hit him like a physical blow, every nerve ending screaming, his wounded arm useless, his ribs making it hard to breathe, blood from his mouth mixing with salt water. Around him, men were calling out, some screaming, some silent, some already going into shock from the cold. He grabbed a piece of wreckage, the overturned hull of Lifeboat 1. 6 other men made it there, 7 total clinging to the wooden hull. The storm had arrived, waves 10 feet high, 12 feet, 15, wind 40 knots in building, sleet and freezing rain cutting through the darkness. The Atlantic in late March is not forgiving. It does not care about your courage or your training or your reasons for being there. It just takes. 2 miles away, Carl Brenner brought U-117 to periscope depth. He had felt the explosion even underwater. Massive enough to register on the hydrophones. Through the periscope, he saw fires on the water. Wreckage scattered across square miles. Nothing left of the Q ship. Mission accomplished, sir, his first officer said. There are lifeboats. Men in the water. Brenner could see them, small shapes against the dark sea, struggling, dying. German U-boat doctrine was clear. No rescue in hostile waters, too dangerous. Bearing to Lorient, Brenner asked, 115, Herr Kalun. Set course, ahead full. His first officer hesitated. Sir, the Americans. Some of them might survive if we... They are dead men, Brenner interrupted. The water will finish them in an hour. We won. Let the ocean claim its due. U-117 turned east, toward France, toward home. Behind him, 87 American sailors struggled to survive in water cold enough to kill. Commander James Morrison clung to the overturned Lifeboat 1 with 6 other men, trying to climb onto the hull, trying to get out of the water, but the storm kept knocking them off, wave after wave. Morrison's mind was failing, hypothermia stealing his thoughts. He saw his daughters, Sarah and Emma, playing on the beach in Charleston. Daddy, they called. Daddy, come play with us. He tried to swim toward them. The man next to him grabbed his collar, tried to pull him back. Let me go, Morrison mumbled. My girls. Have to get to my girls. At approximately 0330 hours on March 27, 1942, Commander James Morrison stopped struggling, stopped swimming, stopped breathing. 38 years old, Naval Academy graduate, career officer, husband, father, dead 300 miles from land. By dawn, the storm had passed. Of the 87 men who had been alive when the Phantom exploded, only 38 remained. The first search aircraft arrived at 0800 hours. The pilot flew for 4 hours. Found nothing. The storm had scattered everything across miles of ocean. USS Noah arrived at 1200 hours. 12 hours of searching. They found pieces, cork floats, wooden planks, 1 life jacket. The life jacket had a name stenciled on it, Ensign D. Chen, blood-stained, torn, empty. That was all they ever found of David Chen. By March 30th, patrol aircraft had found the 5 lifeboats. 3 were empty, 2 still had bodies. Lifeboat 3 held 12 frozen corpses, Chief Gunner Williams among them. They had survived the explosion, made it into the boat, fought the storm all night, and then one by one hypothermia took them. Lifeboat 4 held 1 body, Seaman Thomas Wright. But Wright had not died on March 27th like the others. He had survived, somehow. The only man in his boat still alive when dawn came. He survived March 27th, bailing water, rowing when he could. He survived March 28th, alone now. He survived March 29th, barely. On March 30th, at approximately 0600 hours, Thomas Wright died. But before he died, he wrote something. In the boat's logbook, his handwriting was shaky, the pencil marks faint. The Coast Guard found the logbook when they recovered Lifeboat 4. Read it. Sent it up the chain of command. This is what Thomas Wright wrote to whoever finds this. My name is Thomas Henry Wright, Seaman 2nd Class. Service number 8675402. USS Phantom, sunk March 27. I am the last one. The others are gone. I want my mother to know I was brave. Tell her I did my duty. Tell her America is worth it. Tell her. The entry ended there. Mid-sentence, the pencil trailing off the page. 19 years old. Navy service 11 months. Last words. Tell her America is worth it. On April 9th, 1942, 2 weeks after the Phantom sank, Radio Berlin made an announcement. The High Command announces that a 3,000-ton American Q-boat was sunk by WWII after a battle fought partly on the surface with artillery, partly beneath the water with torpedoes. The enemy's treacherous use of disguised warships has been defeated by German naval superiority. British intelligence intercepted it, passed it to the U.S. Navy. Admiral Ernest King read the transcript, then swore, loudly. The Germans knew about Project LQ. They had known for weeks. Security was compromised. Morrison and his crew had never had a chance. King ordered an immediate review. The report came back on April 30th. Brutal, honest, results: 0 U-boats sunk. 1 Q ship lost with all hands. 141 trained sailors dead. $500,000 wasted. Security compromised. Tactical doctrine fundamentally flawed. Recommendation: terminate Project LQ immediately. King signed the order the same day. By August 1942, Project LQ was over, erased from official records, buried in classified files. Margaret Morrison received her telegram on March 31st. The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your husband, Commander James Morrison, is missing in action. No details, no explanation, just missing. She wrote back, demanded answers. Where? How was he brave? The Navy's response: information classified. Margaret would wait 2 years for the truth. On April 5, 1944, she finally received official notification. Ship sunk by enemy action. Remains not recovered. Presumed dead. Still no details. But at least now she knew. Jim was gone. Sarah and Emma grew up without their father. Margaret told them, "Your father died serving his country. He was brave." But she never told them the full truth until 1947, when the Navy declassified parts of Project LQQ ship. Secret program, sunk on first patrol, complete failure. Jim Morrison had died for a plan that did not work. Was it worth it? Margaret asked herself that question for 72 years, until she died in 2014 at age 100, still keeping Jim's last letter in her Bible, still wearing his wedding ring. And the answer is yes, but not the way anyone expected. Project LQ failed completely. 0 U-boats sunk, 141 lives lost. But the failure had value. It forced the Navy to find solutions that actually worked. By May 1942, the U.S. Navy implemented the convoy system. Every merchant ship crossed the Atlantic in organized groups, protected by destroyer escorts, coordinated air cover, and it worked. June 5, U-boats sunk. July 7, August 9. By September, German submarine operations off the American coast became too dangerous. Operation Drumbeat was over. The Battle of the Atlantic would continue for 3 more years, but the tide had turned, not because of Q ships, because of convoys, air patrols, radar, sonar, technology, training, systematic application of proven tactics. By the end of World War II, Germany had lost 780 U-boats out of 1,100 built. 28,000 German submariners died, 75% casualty rate. The hunters became the hunted. And it started with lessons learned from failures like the Phantom. Karl Brenner returned to Lorient on May 2, 1942. He had sunk 19 ships, 90,000 tons. He received the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. Hitler personally pinned the medal on his uniform. Brenner was 29 years old, a hero. He was also finished with combat. The strain had broken him. He relinquished command on July 31st, transferred to training duty. Later to torpedo development, then Marine infantry. He survived the war because he got diphtheria in April 1945. While hospitalized, his entire infantry unit was wiped out. After the war, British prisoner, released late 1946, built an oil trading business, became wealthy, served on Bremen City Council for 32 years. When journalists asked about the war, Brenner was careful. "I was a sailor," he said, "not a Nazi. I did my duty for my country." In his memoir published 1998, Brenner devoted 1 paragraph to the Phantom, page 203. On 27 March 1942, U-117 engaged an American Q ship. We sank her with torpedoes. One of my crew died. From then I trusted no merchant ship. No mention of 141 Americans who died. No reflection on the human cost. Karl Brenner died on June 9, 2018, 105 years old. Last surviving U-boat ace from Operation Drumbeat. His funeral drew hundreds. Military honors. His headstone reads, Carl Brenner, served with honor, 1913 to 2018. Commander James Morrison has no headstone. His body was never recovered. His name is carved on the tablets of the missing at the U.S. Fleet Memorial in Annapolis. One name among thousands. David Chen is on that wall. Bull Mackenzie, Thomas Wright, 137 others. Names in stone, no bodies beneath, just memory. Margaret Morrison died in 2014. Her daughter Sarah found something in her Bible next to Jim's last letter. A newspaper clipping from 1998, an obituary. Kapitan Lieutenant Carl Brenner retired. Why would Mom keep this? Sarah asked. Maybe Emma said because she needed to know that the man who killed Dad was human too. Not a monster, just a man. That is what we forget about war, that it is humans killing humans, not monsters, just people with families and hopes and fears. Sometimes the people who kill live to be 105, while the people who die are 38 or 22 or 19. That is not fair. That is war. So what do we learn from the Phantom? First, courage is not about success. It is about trying even when success is not guaranteed. Morrison knew the odds. Chen knew the risks. Mackenzie knew it was probably suicide. They went anyway. Second, failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of the path to success. Project LQ failed, but that failure taught lessons that helped win the Battle of the Atlantic. Third, sacrifice is not measured by immediate results. Morrison did not live to see the convoy system work, did not see Germany defeated, did not see his daughters grow up, but his sacrifice bought time. Time for America to learn, time to adapt, time to win. The USS Phantom has never been found. Estimated position, 37 degrees 12 minutes north, 72 degrees 45 minutes west. Depth approximately 600 feet. 126 bodies were never recovered. They rest somewhere in the Atlantic, 300 miles east of Norfolk. Their families got telegrams, got form letters, got sympathy, but not answers. For 2 years they waited, until finally the truth came out. Classified mission, failed program, total loss. Was it worth it? Was their sacrifice meaningful? Yes. Not because they succeeded, because they failed in a way that taught us how to succeed. Not because they killed the enemy, because they died proving that courage alone is not enough. Not because their plan worked, because their failure forced better plans. That is the lesson of the Phantom. That is what 141 American sailors died to teach us. Desperation is not strategy. Gimmicks do not win wars. Courage without wisdom leads to graves. But failure honestly acknowledged and carefully studied leads to victory. The men who fought World War II understood that. They fought when they had to fight, failed when tactics did not work, learned from their mistakes, adapted, improved, won. That is why we call them the greatest generation. Not because they never failed, because they learned from failure and kept fighting anyway. Thomas Wright knew that, 19 years old, dying alone. He wrote, "Tell her America is worth it." He believed it. They all believed it. And 73 years of American prosperity and freedom proved they were right. Fair winds and following seas to the crew of the USS Phantom. You served with honor, you failed with courage, and you taught us lessons we still need today. Your names are carved in marble. Your sacrifice lives in history, and as long as we remember you, you are not truly gone.